Chapter 3. That is ridiculous. Rita leaned back on the bar stool and threw back another shot. I have not had enough. There is no such thing as enough. She was drunk. She had been drunk off in the past few weeks. She vehemently claimed that it had nothing to do with Malachi's death. She was just having fun. She needed to have fun. Her life was a bore, and it was embarrassing. You have most certainly had enough. The bartender took away the glass and looked at her sternly. Rita, pull yourself together. You're a mess. I am what I want to be, Rita giggled in response. Out. Rita stumbled out the door into the dark street. She didn't know why, but her drunk feet always carried her to the same place every evening. The dry stains were still there. They had faded considerably, but there they were, revealed by the weak rays of a flickering street lamp. They were no longer deep red, but a dark brown color. Blood. Why was everything tied to blood? Why did the soul always escape the body once deprived of it? Was blood itself the soul that held everything together? The questions tossed and churned in her mind. She was far too drunk to deal with this right now. You know I don't miss you, right? Her voice slightly quivered. I'm glad you're dead. You were a bore anyway. You know that, Malachi? I absolutely hated you. The only good thing you ever did for me was tell me no and die when I asked you to hold on. I'm better off without you. Good. The deep, gravelly voice was so close behind her, she felt a warm breath on her ear, causing her to jump. She spun around and looked up, way up, at a tall, dangerously sharp man. His eyes sparked cruelly at her from under thick black brows that matched his long, straight hair. He wore a black cloak that made him look intense and foreboding, standing there in that eerie lighting. You look positively evil. Her drunk mind blurted the statement before she could stop it. He laughed. His laugh sent a chill through her whole body, starting in her heart and freezing the alcohol in her stomach. She felt goosebumps spread up her arms, and the hairs on her neck stood on end. Is looking evil a positive thing to you, my dear Rita? He smiled at her, and she immediately felt sick. How do you know my name? He regarded her silently for a moment. That silence stretched on for miles, and Rita struggled to keep her wayward mind from reacting to it. She needed to be still. There was something predatory about this man, and it terrified the part of her that was still sober. It soon became apparent that he had no intention of answering her question. Instead, he grabbed her hand and placed a single cold kiss in the palm of it. She stood unmoving as he pulled his face away and stared at her face intently. She returned the stare unflinchingly until he let go. Good night, Rita. His voice was a whisper. Then he was gone. It all happened so quickly, she wondered if she had imagined it. Turning back to the stained cobblestones, she shook her head rapidly, trying to remember where she was. There was something she wanted to say to Malachi, something important. Her mind took on the form of a mini tornado, tossing her about so wildly, she could not think straight. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. She wanted to say something, but she could not think of any words. She wanted to run, and yet her feet remained anchored. Malachi. It was more of a moan than a spoken name. Malachi, I really needed you. You were the only thing keeping me sane here. You were a bit crazy and off in the head, but I like that about you. When I say I hate you, I mean it. I really do. The lie is when I say I've always hated you. Finally, the tears came, one after another, until her shoulders began to heave. You are my friends. I hate you for leaving. I need your stupid stories about silly girls with long dresses, flowers, and cute animals. I want to hear about the handsome prince who left her. The one who would stop at nothing to save her. Malachi, I want someone to save me. I want you to come back, but you cannot, and I will never forgive you for that. She clenched her hands into fists, but then gasped when a sharp pain shot up her right arm. She held it out in front of her, so the faint source of light could illuminate the palm of her hand where the phantom visitor had kissed her earlier that evening. It was bleeding. A slow but steady trickle ran across the skin of her small white palm until it hit her wrist. She stared at it blankly for a moment. While her unstable mind tried to piece together what was happening, a drop of blood fell to the ground, hitting one of the stones below, painting over the dry blood that was there prior. She saw her blood hit Malachi's and made a small, terrified whimper. Then she ran. The next morning, Rita opened her eyes and winced at the ceiling. "Beth?" She smiled weakly as the older woman's footsteps drew close. "Who hit me in the head with a frying pan?" "No one did, dear." Beth sat beside her, laying a cold, wet rag across her forehead. "You did it again, Rita. I can only put up with this behavior so long. I know you miss Malachi, but no." Rita pulled the rag off and sat up. "I do not miss Malachi. That fraud got what he deserved, and I hate him, Beth." "Very well." Beth took the rag and looked sympathetically at the distraught young lady she considered to be her friend. "But I mean it. No more drinking like this." "I'm just having fun." "Is this headache fun, Rita?" Beth sighed. "The men are going fishing tonight, and I need you to go with them. We need more food." "Why can't you go?" Rita grumbled as she swung her legs over the side of the bed. "I could go," Beth nodded. "But if I go, who will stay awake and make sure you get home alive? I am sorry, but you are going. Your drinking spree can start again later." "Did you just give me permission?" Rita jokingly raised her eyebrows. "That was not permission." Beth stood up and playfully threw the damp rag in Rita's face, more like a prediction. Rita laughed as her friend left the room. Now that she was alone, she reached for the glass of water sitting next to her bed and groaned as hot pain spread through her hand when brought into contact with the glass. She looked at the sore place and saw a small raw cut surrounded by dry blood in the middle of her palm. Faint memories from a drunken haze came to her little by little as she closely studied her hand. That man, he was real. The tall, scary man with cruel eyes who was strange, almost devious. He had really spoken to her last night. Why did he kiss her, and why did she bleed afterwards? She was still looking pointedly at the small cut when a small drop of blood seeped from its side and pooled into her palm. It was dark and red, mesmerizing, beautiful. A clattering sound came from the kitchen, snapping her out of her reverie. "I need to bandage this," she whispered to herself, and then stood to her feet. Time passed quickly that morning until it found her standing in the front door watching a torrent of rain fall from the sky. Without hesitating, she walked right into it, letting it drench her hair and weigh down her clothes. Tilting her head back, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The air smelled fresh and crisp as it bathed in the rainwater which ran all over her face, sticking in her eyelashes and clinging to her lips. And yet, that was not the only smell Rita's nose detected that beautiful rainy morning. Somewhere in that blurring rainstorm was a source that emitted a peculiar smell, extremely faint and yet strange enough it couldn't be missed. It was the strong, alluring scent of copper